your host, Mimosa,
and co-host Kareem.
Welcome to Sometimes We're Bougie and Sometimes We Hood, to healing, navigating grief. It's a podcast dedicated to exploring the complex emotions of loss, the road to healing, and the strength found in remembrance. Welcome in, everybody.
Am I not showing up? Oh, okay. Hey, how y'all doing?
How you doing? So, what if I told you that getting housed can sometimes feel like a loss? All right. So, welcome back to Sometimes We Bougie.
Hey, sometimes we hood.
And part 2 of Grieving the Streets, when housing doesn't feel like home. Yeah. So I'm your host, Auntie Mimosa.
Hey, this is cousin Kareem. How y'all doing?
And today we're diving back into that conversation that might make some people very uncomfortable, because we're going to talk about grief, not after loss, not after divorce, not after diagnosis, but grief after becoming or getting a home. Right? And most would be like, what? How is that possible? Yes. So you heard that absolutely right. What if I told you that for some people, receiving an apartment key feels less like a celebration and more like a loss? Right? What if I told you that for some people, receiving an apartment key, or getting home housed for homeless, right? That stabilizing or stability can feel destabilizing. That silence can feel loud. That four walls can feel more isolating than the street corner they once called home. Well, today we're talking about the grief no one prepares people for when they transition from homelessness into housing. And because housing is a structural solution, but home is an emotional experience. And when someone has survived outside, built a community outside, found identity outside, and created a routine, a life outside, but being placed inside can feel like displacement, right? So we don't talk about it enough. We celebrate like the housing numbers, right? We track placements. We measure retention rates when it comes to housing or providing support to the homeless, right? But we don't always make space for the emotional transition. And here's what I know, both professionally and personally. Grief is not just about loss. Grief is any significant change that alters your sense of safety, belonging, identity, or control. I'm going to say it again. Grief is any significant change that alters your sense of safety, belonging, identity, or control. And when someone moves from the streets into an apartment, they may be grieving. Most people don't think about that. You see that person on the street corner, you see a homeless individual. You don't realize that there's a whole family, a whole community, a whole connection to that individual, right? And when someone moves from the streets into an apartment or to a home, they lose their community, they lose their survival identity, they lose their daily connection. There's loss of predictability, even the loss of familiar chaos. Yes, Okay. And sometimes healing feels more threatening than the survival. Sometimes quiet feels lonelier than the noise, right? And sometimes stability feels unfamiliar, and unfamiliar feels unsafe.
Yeah.
Okay. So, welcome in TikTok fam, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube fam. Thank you for joining Cousin Kareem and I. And we're picking up on part two of the we're picking up part two on grief and the homeless. And I don't know if you all remember, like I always say that a lot of things that we talk about here on the show is about what we experience. Okay, what we go through in life, the difficult conversations, we're going to have them, the uncomfortable conversations, we are going to have it. And we talk about things about when it comes to grief aspects, every aspect of life that we don't think about. Okay, that we don't think about. Hold on one second. Let me see if I can get her in here. Get my sister in here. She was supposed to come the other way. I don't know what's going on with my phone. Let's see. Um, let's see what's going on here. If she's gonna come in, but welcome in, welcome in. So, with all of that being said, if we are going to talk about housing stabilization like in a real way, especially like here in the Atlanta area and in communities across this country, we have to talk about the emotional weight of the transition. Okay. That
Okay.
is important. We have to talk about that because forced housing without emotional preparation can lead or like forced identity change, right?
Yeah.
Most people are like, oh my God, you put them in a house or you helped a homeless person get housing. It's so great. They off the street. But when you think about it, and if you have not worked with an individual who's homeless, or you have not experienced that, or if you have not yourself taken it the step to house a homeless individual, when you go back to visit them or you do that circle around and you go into their home or in an apartment or hotel, whatever, and you find them, they're not sleeping in the bed. They may have made a pallet on the floor. They may still have all of their items packed up because they're thinking that at any time, like the shoe could drop, the other shoe could drop, and they'll be without a house. They'll be
Right.
homeless again. So, with that being said, today we're holding space for the person who misses the street family they didn't choose but deeply loved. We're holding space for the person who sits in an empty apartment and wonders like why they feel sad instead of grateful. We're holding space for the person who sits who are no, I'm sorry, we're holding space for the case managers, right? And therapists who see their clients struggling, see these individuals struggling, but don't always have language for what's happening. This conversation is not about discouraging housing. So let me make that clear. It's not about discouraging housing. It's about humanizing the transaction or the transition, right? Because stabilization is not just financial, it's emotional, it's relational, it's psychological, and it deserves compassion.
Yeah.
So settle in and we're gonna talk about this, about
Okay.
the grief and becoming housed, right? So, cousin Kareem, give me your thoughts about what we talked about last week. I mean, we covered a lot last week. We talked about homelessness, like it creates community and predictability and street families and survival identity. We pointed out that, there's displacement grief, identity loss, and survival grief, environmental grief, right? And we talked about the fact that housing solves structural problems, but it doesn't automatically solve loneliness, trauma, identity disruption, nervous system dysregulation,
Deregulation.
right? I can't get it out, and grief.
Yeah.
So that's what we are. That's what we talked about last week. What are your thoughts? Like, what were you thinking after we had that conversation? And then we'll dive into part two.
Yeah, I meant to like mention this one guy picked up, and I drove him around trying to find a house, trying to find a place to stay. I drove around for about 10 hours that day. No gas money from nobody, even though it was a recommendation from my. I, anyway, it was a recommendation from pastor I used to have when I was going to church, and this guy he was here living in the bushes in one of the big state parks. Just living in the bushes. He came over here. He got brought to a hotel in
Mm-hmm.
Oregon. They cut his hair, shaved his face, gave him a new set of clothes, put him on a plane, set him in Hawaii, told him where to go to get a tent
Mm-hmm.
that he could live in. Got there, got a toothbrush, got a cup, you know what I mean? And a couple other things, a blanket, a
Mm-hmm.
sleeping bag. And that was it. That was it. Somehow he got the church's number, contacted the pastor. I went down, drove around the whole island for 10
Mm-hmm.
hours. And this guy, it wound up that he didn't understand the process of how to obtain a house or how
Mm-hmm.
to obtain a place. So we're driving around, we get to two places. They're like, well, you never called and registered.
Mm.
And it's just like, he knew where the places were, but he
Right.
never called and registered for the training.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like, wait a minute. You got me, a perfect stranger, driving you around with my own gas money, no gas money from you, and you didn't even do the process right. And
Mm-hmm.
it made me realize that, but in talking to him for those 10 hours, it made me realize that people are coming to different places not by their own choice.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times it has to do with the state. We didn't get into that last week, but
Okay.
it was just something that I wanted to bring up in this
Mm-hmm.
whole matter of facts and truths and essence is that a lot of people are being transferred out of places to other places, quote unquote, for their own protection because they're afraid of the winter for them. That was his reasoning for getting on the plane and coming out here. I'm not sure if he's still out here, but he
Right.
was also chasing somebody.
Mm.
Uh, but then he didn't have the wherewithal in his mind to do better for himself, to stay
Okay.
there, bring himself up, and then get back in the route of pursuing somebody.
Mm-hmm.
A couple other people that I have met, they were like literally mentally not there to
Okay.
withhold and hold up. It was kind of strange. It was kind of
Mm-hmm.
strange. Oh, there you go. Um, yeah, it was a lot of it had to do with just missing. I would say missing information. I guess maybe
Okay.
just didn't know what they were signing up for, and they got lost in the sauce of trying to figure out how do I get out of this situation, or maybe I like this situation. It
Okay.
was kind of it was kind of
Right.
sad. But
Okay.
as far as like last week, yeah, it was a eye opener just to a lot of different thought processes on how people get into these positions in the first place. You know,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of people just don't know they're in a position, but they
Right.
just kind of drift along with the course, and all of a sudden they're in this position a whole year and a half later, and
Mm-hmm.
now what do I do? You know,
Right. So, of course, like I've said before, I let the sometimes we bougie, sometimes we hood family know that one, I'm a case manager, and I've worked in behavioral health, mental health. Um, Now I'm working with, work with children, and now I'm working with adults that are now placed in housing, right? So, in this initiative to house is the city of Atlanta, is that their initiative. The governor, I mean, not governor, the mayor, the new mayor, is his initiative to ensure that the homeless are off the streets. Okay, great. Yes. However, some of these individuals, in what my job is, right? My job is to ensure or to get them stable. Okay. So, like we said, they're coming off the streets, in these tent cities, encampments, living in cars, in shelters. They create an identity for themselves. They create a family. They have a connection, right? Um, they have roles and responsibilities, right? So thank you, TikTok fan, thank you. So they have roles and responsibilities, and depending on what they're the provider, they're the protector. And when I say the provider, they're the person, as the provider will say, "Hey, St. Mary's down the street, they're giving out clothes, or so this organization is handing out plates. Y'all go get your food." You have the protector who won't allow anybody to be messed with, especially like the women and children that are in these encampments and tent cities, or if somebody's frail. So they have different roles and responsibilities. So a lot of times what takes place is once they're moved and we have the outreach, there's a lot of organizations, they have what they call street outreach, right? Excuse me. And I was hoping one of my co-workers would come on, because under my employer, we have a transit system outreach, right? So anybody who lives in Atlanta, you know about MARTA. If you don't live in Atlanta, or in Atlanta area, MARTA is our rapid transit system, our bus and train. So my employer has an outreach sector where these ladies walk the trains. They walk the trains, they ride the trains, looking for individuals that are homeless. And their home is actually the train, that one seat. And they ride that train from one end to the other all day long. Okay. Or until they're chased off. That's a whole outreach. Okay. And and then we have an outreach that's out at the airport, at Atlanta Airport, where you'll find sometimes homeless individuals, they will go into the airport for shelter, and they kind of hang out. Now, of course, they can't get past security, but that first lobby area where people are getting dropped off and they can walk in there and sit down and sit in the chair and be warm, and that's where they are. And we have a whole airport outreach there too as well. So the airport outreach and the MARTA outreach, they work together. To get individuals housed, right? Or get them to start the process. So we're going to start off with, what does forced to be housed mean? What does that mean? Okay. So to understand like the housing transition and what it really means, like when we talk about getting someone housed, we often use policy language. Those of you that are case managers or have worked with homeless individuals or work with nonprofits or what have you, or in this field of casework, case management, social work, we use a lot of policy language, right? So, but behind every policy term is a nervous system adjusting to change. Right? So, and I'm gonna break that down, right? And what the path actually feels like from somebody on the inside. Okay, I'm gonna break that down. So imagine the best way, like to do a comparison. Imagine I'm gonna say, put it like this: everybody has some trauma, right? Some kind of trauma. If you don't, kudos to you. Okay. Kudos. But just about everybody has some kind of trauma. And when you experience trauma, your nervous system is always in survival mode, right? So with that being said, I'm gonna say this again. Behind every policy term for social workers, case managers, those of us that are in this field, licensed therapists, licensed social workers, so forth and so on. Behind every policy term is a nervous system adjusting to change. Okay. Rapid rehousing placement. Most people don't know what that is. I'm explaining to you. So rapid rehousing is designed to move people quickly from homelessness into permanent housing with short-term rental assistance. Okay. On paper, it's effective. It's evidence-based, right? It reduces time homelessness. Okay. But emotionally, it can feel abrupt. Imagine living in survival mode for months, years, and then within days or weeks, you're handed keys and told, you're housed, here's your new home, congratulations, make it work.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy.
Right? Or you're told, and then your case manager is told, work to get them stabilized, right? So there's often minimal emotional preparation, limited time to process the transition, and immediate pressure to maintain or either bring in an income. And then there's a countdown on your rental assistance, right? Really. And that's the truth of it. And that's so true. And the body may still be in survival mode. And the emotion, or even though the environment has changed, you're still living in survival mode. So that's mismatched, and it creates internal friction. And that's why a lot of homeless individuals don't always stay housed. They will go back to the street. Because, and here's the real of it. Here is the real of it. Thursday, one of my clients came to me, asked me for food. Okay. I've located a grocery bag of food, a snack pack. Actually, it was like a little snack pack. It had like a can of ravioli, some crackers, some applesauce and things in it. I gave it to her, gave it to the client. She sat down, opened the can of ravioli, and just ate the can of ravioli. My colleague said to her, why didn't you use the microwave to heat up your ravioli? Her response, I don't know how to use a microwave. Her response, I don't know how to use a microwave. Think about that. On the streets, you're not using a microwave.
Yeah.
In a tent city or an encampment, you're not using a microwave.
Yeah. She assumed, like your associate assumed that she knew. I guess. I don't know.
Right. The things we take for granted, the things we do every day that we take for granted, right? That process. So now I have to teach her how to work a microwave when I go to work tomorrow. I have to teach her how to work a microwave. They have laundry facilities, a laundry room on the site. Some of them don't know how to wash their clothes. Because why? They're used to washing their clothes, hand washing them in whatever they could catch water in, and hanging them across their tent or fence or whatever to dry. So now I have to teach how to do laundry, separating your lights from your dark, your whites, how much soap to put into the washing machine, how to make sure your clothes are dry, right? Those are all the things we take for granted that we do that I now have to teach somebody to do. So let's talk about hotel vouchers, right? Some people have heard about that. Oh, go get a hotel voucher. You can go stay in a hotel, or some organizations do provide those. But however, hotel placements are often just like emergency solutions. They provide immediate shelter, temporary safety, and short-term relief. And the hotels are transitional by nature, but they don't feel permanent, and they're not permanent. And the individual, like, they don't feel rooted, Okay. And then you have to think about sometimes the conditions of those hotels. So when we say hotel vouchers, we're not talking about a hotel voucher for the Marriott or Caesar's Palace or the Hilton. Okay. We're talking about a hotel voucher to probably like a Motel 6, a
Yeah.
Redwood Inn. It's
Yeah.
not an expensive hotel.
Yeah,
Okay.
I was gonna say a motel more so than
Right.
anything.
Than anything
Yeah.
else. And then when you look at the environment, that type of environment, everybody's in that environment, right? And then when you look at what is it like the extended stay, like I know sometimes some of the extended stays they have where you can pay about a week. You can stay somewhere for a whole week. But that environment is not always the best environment. Okay? Because you'll have um street ladies. I was trying to think how to say that so I don't get dinged on TikTok, right? Um, you have street women, right? Or ladies of the night, whatever you want to call them, but they day, night, in afternoon, whatever. Okay. Then you have the non-legal pharmaceutical folks, right, in there. So it's not always the safest environment. It's not. It really isn't. And residents, they often feel anxiety when the voucher ends because it's like, where do I go next? Or can I get another one? Or, they just, like I said, they're ready and waiting to go back to the encampment, to tent cities, to their car, whatever. There's isolation because there's no shared community space like a shelter or the encampments or the tent cities. And then there's fear of violating the hotel policies because now you're being placed in a situation to where you have rules to follow. And just like with rapid rehousing, when you go into this apartment, you have a lease and you have to abide by the rules on this lease, right? And if there's a visitor policy, because sometimes what we find is that a homeless individual get housed and now they want to bring their other people with them, right? You can't do that, unfortunately. You can't do that because the house is for you. And
Yeah.
I'm sure that the outreach team, they would eventually get to the rest of those individuals, and they may not always end up in the same housing development or apartment development, right?
Yeah.
So yeah. So that also provides like uncertainty about what's going to come next. It could feel like being suspended between homelessness and housing and not fully in either, right? So that emotional limbo carries its own grief, believe it or not. It carries its own grief. And like I said, the lady that my client, and she's a sweetheart, and I had to tell her like I have to do room checks or apartment checks. I call them rooms because they're really small and they're cute though, but they remind you like I don't know if you had a dorm room, it was like a single twin bed. The TV is on the wall. They have a small refrigerator, a microwave combo, air fryer. They have a little table, one chair that they sit in, and they have a well, not a full bathroom, but a shower, a toilet, you know what I'm saying, sink in the bathroom. They have a sink so they can wash their dishes, and they are provided a moving kit. And in that moving kit, they get one set of twin sheets, they get a comforter, they get one pillow, they get a plate set for one plate, saucer, bowl, cup, silverware for one, and one pot, one pan. They have like their first set of cleaning supplies is just to get them so established, right? Get them started. And then of course my goal is to establish them. If they don't have income, work to get their income. If they don't have SNAP benefits, which is food stamps, help them get those established. If they don't have a cell phone, get that established. If they like I said, they need income, SSI, SSDI, so you have, Social Security or disability, get that worked out. And then provide them resources for food. Like, here, these are where the food banks are. You got to get there. Because the thing about it is, we still have to remember you were resilient on the street. You still have to be resilient.
Yeah, in the
'Cause,
system.
right. You still have to be resilient. So just like I go to work every day and I have to pay my bills and buy my groceries, you all eventually have to get to that point, you know? So let's talk about mandated program entry. Okay, so if you don't know what that is, so mandated program entry, sometimes housing or shelters across, they require compliance, right? Case management participation, curfews, sobriety requirements, employment engagement, and behavioral agreements. And while this structure can be helpful, so, to in the long term, eventually get them to be productive citizens, right? But sometimes they don't want that. Sometimes they can't even obtain that because they may have mental instability, right? So when entry feels forced rather than chosen, it can activate resistance, shame, powerlessness, and past trauma around authority figures. As for individuals with histories of incarceration, institutionalization, childhood systems like foster care, um, mandated structures can feel re traumatizing. And the nervous system, like they say, our bodies remember every hurt, every trauma. Our nervous system remembers it all. Our everything. Our muscles remember it all, right? So, yes, again, it's a great thing for them to move into this, but at the same time, it may be creating some trauma, additional trauma for them. Even though that's not the goal of the agencies, right? It's creating additional trauma. What are your thoughts, cousin Kareem?
Yeah, I can see that. That's what when I talk to some of the people out here. I'm in Hawaii, if y'all don't know, but when I talk to some of the people out here, so we get a lot of migrants, not migrants, how you want to say? We get a lot of transfers from the West Coast. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, transfers from the West Coast.
Mhm.
And from talking to them, a lot of people just don't understand what they were going through. A lot of times it was just them trying to find somebody that they
Mhm.
remember because they were either high. Most of the five people, I talked to a limited amount of people. I only talked to about 5 people.
Okay.
And the 5 people, well, 4 of them were talking about when I was on drugs, I was high. I didn't know where my people went. And then they found out that they were over here. Then they had
Mhm.
to spend the time to try to get money, to try to fend for a ticket to get back to
Mhm.
their state
Okay.
of origin.
Mhm.
And so, but it's kind of difficult to do that when you're out of when you're not in the working system, I guess, if you want to say that. If you're not in cahoots with making money, working and doing for yourself. So it's kind of just strange.
Not really. All you gotta do is wait for something big to come to that city. No, I'm just kidding. Because I know people like, what? Yeah. If you live in Atlanta and you've been here
Something.
for a while,
Mm,
without me having to say it. Okay. You
nah,
know. The Olympics, you know. Okay.
yeah.
So, and like now, what's coming in the future? You know. That's all I'm gonna say.
Hmm.
Um, but yes. So with that, you know, sometimes there's what they call a city cleanup, right? Where some cities may feel like they're overflowing with homeless individuals,
Yeah. Right.
and they may be giving a bus ticket or a plane ticket one way,
Yeah.
one way, no return, one way.
Right. Yeah. Once you go, yeah.
And that's I mean, we're laughing about it, but it is not a laughing matter. However, that's what happens. And it's very real.
Yeah.
And that's how some cities in other states become over flooded with homeless individuals. And then, they kind of migrate and make their way back, right?
Yeah.
And
So let
so,
me. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go.
No, I was gonna ask you. So I went out to this one place, and in a certain area outside of the airport over here,
Mm-hmm.
and I was dealing with one person. Then I saw a car pull up,
Mm-hmm.
and person got out with like 3 grocery bags, and I'm like, how did this person just? And then the guy was like, "See, this is what I'm talking about." I was talking to, and I'm like, "What's going on?" He goes, "This guy's family every month brings him groceries," and I'm thinking to myself, if you have the time and the capacity to go to the store, buy food for somebody, then where does the time and the capacity come in to just bring them in your place? Like, how far do you not want to help them? You're helping them with a certain budget of food that you bring them every month. But now, so anyway, that's just one of the things I guess I wanted to bring up or to you.
Okay. And
You
that's
can help
great.
me out with.
Right. Hey Shane, how are you, sweetie? So yes. The question, and here's the questions that have to be asked about that situation. One is does the individual have any type of illness, mental instability, behavioral issues? If that is the case, right? The family that brings them groceries every week, maybe that's all they can do because the individual is too unstable to be in their home. Right? So then the next step, somebody will go, well, put them in an institution. Oh, a lot of those have been closed. A lot of institutions have been closed down because of the fact that there is there was a law that was I can't think of the woman's name that did this. It's a disability act that was passed where a lot of individuals are now back into society, living in group homes, some living in group homes, transition homes, where they're to function as quote unquote normal citizens. Okay. Versus putting them into institutions where they were living in the, I want to say what, 70s, 80s, because of the treatment they were receiving. They weren't treated nicely. Okay, they weren't treated with dignity and they weren't treated with human beings. Some people were experimented on, they were given way too much medication because workers didn't want to deal with behaviors. Women were being taken advantage of. You had people who were mentally had mental disabilities or have physical disabilities, and all of a sudden they coming up pregnant. Like it was a lot of things that were going on to it. Individuals that have mental disabilities and physical disabilities, they couldn't defend themselves, couldn't talk for themselves, advocate for themselves, and the mental institutions, they were looking really
Yeah,
bad.
they're being taken advantage of, basically.
Right.
Yeah.
It was looking really bad. So there was a movement to put them into society, back into society. So, and with that, and here's what I find. Depending on the onset of mental disability, depending on the onset of mental disability, depending on the type of mental disability, sometimes families deny it. And they want to believe that their loved one is very much like there's nothing wrong, and they do not understand the mental disability that they have, such as schizophrenia or bipolar or personality disorder. They don't understand it. They do not comprehend or understand that the person that's standing in front of you now is not the person they were 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, or whenever that onset came on. Okay. And now we're finding it's getting younger and younger and younger. Okay. 18, 16, 17, 15-year-olds are now being diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. They're starting to have, auditory hallucinations and visual hallucinations.
Wow.
That's okay.
Yeah, the mental challenges are growing.
It really is. And, a lot. And I've come across parents who want their 18-year-old, but that's not what they used to do. They used to go to school. They used to be really smart and they could do for themselves and blah, blah, blah. But that's not who the person is in front of you now. Your child is not that child anymore. And the parent and the family, they have to be able to embrace the new person.
Changes. Yeah.
Okay. They have to be able to embrace the new person that's there with these changes. And a lot of people don't do it. They don't know how to. And if you say go to support groups, talk to the therapist, talk to whoever, over the head. No, there's nothing wrong with them. Yes, there's something very much wrong with them. And then there's the vicious cycle of you get them on their medication, they get stable, they feel they don't need to take the medication. Now they're off their medication, right? And then by the time they realize that they need to take their medication, they're far too gone. Now they go back into the hospital, or they're 1013 because they might go to a day program, or you know what I'm saying, or something happens to where they're in the street and they're having an episode and they encounter the police, and the police are not trained. And yes, I'm saying this, and I don't care, come for me if you want to. The law enforcement is not trained on how to deal with individuals with mental disabilities. They're not. They are not trained. Okay. So when it comes to dealing with them, they want to, all of a sudden it's force. You want to put them in handcuffs. Yes. And yes, I understand. Believe me, like I said, I work in mental health. I worked in mental health. I know what it is. Can they become aggressive? Yes. But you have to talk to them. If you talk to them like they're a person and not treat them like they're an animal or talk down to them, you will get a whole lot further. But again, law enforcement, they don't know how to do that. They want to assert their authority. You can't always do that. And yes, again, I said it. Come for me if you want to. And I always say it.
Yeah, that's one of the things they had like reported out here was that because they had an incident with an individual who wasn't, I don't know how you want to say it, but he wasn't auditorily there. He didn't know how to speak the right words to lower the intensity on the situation. And they shot him. And then it was like a whole trial, 4 or 5 months of, well, did he need to be shot? This. And it was a sad situation. The prognosis of everything was basically was his fault, for not saying, hey, I'm special needs. And it was just like,
how does somebody?
Yeah, what time are you gonna say that I am? It's like
that's ridiculous. Like, hey, that is utterly ridiculous. The average person once they diagnose, they'll tell you, okay, you give them the diagnosis, they hear it enough, then they'll repeat it. Oh, I'm schizophrenic, or but 9 times out of 10, the person, when they're first having these episodes, they don't know it's schizophrenia. They don't know what it is. They just know they're hearing things and these voices are telling them to do something, or they're seeing stuff and it's telling them to do something. You know what I'm saying? And that's what they're responding to. And if you don't pay attention, if you do not pay attention, and this is what I found as well, especially with somebody, an individual that's paranoid schizophrenic, they'll be talking back to their voices. And a lot of times family members and the people around them, they tend to think that they're talking to them. But if you listen, if you pay attention and listen to the conversation, if you hear the conversation and you hear what they're saying, it doesn't even match what you're saying. It doesn't even like, you know what I'm saying? And if it's an aggressive tone, you just have to stop for a minute. If you stop talking and they keep talking and you realize, oh, they're not talking to me. Why are you feeding into it? Don't feed into it.
Yeah, a lot of people just want to hear. They want to hear themselves say the viewpoint that they're having, but they don't want to listen to the response. A lot of people just want to give direction and not hear any kind of anything response.
Right. Exactly.
It's that.
So, well, I'm gonna swing back around because we have about 12 minutes, 13 minutes left. So I want to jump back into the grieving and homelessness. So we have like shelter to apartment transitions, right? So shelters can be very challenging. They can be, but they do provide built-in social interaction, shared meals, routines, and the presence of staff, right? Some shelters do not have a good name or a good reputation because they can be dangerous. And at one point in time, they used to house everybody together, men, women, and children. Now it's there's a women's shelter, or there's a men's shelter, or women and children. Or if it's one shelter, then they separate, women and children on one side, men on the other, for safety reasons, right? And then moving into an apartment removes that constant human proximity, right? So it's suddenly there's no one checking in daily. No one notices if you haven't left your room. There's no communal meals. They're not eating together. So for someone accustomed to a collective living, right, that silence can feel startling. And those who have experienced trauma and isolation before, being alone again, they can feel unsafe. They can really feel unsafe in that situation. So, and then with housing, like housing with program compliance requirements, right? Supportive housing, it does include regular home visits, documentation requirements, inspections, income verification, and behavior compliance, right? I just told y'all what my job is. And that's what I do for the individuals, for my caseload, right? And I like this because my caseload is about 23 individuals. And I have to lay my eyes on those individuals every single day. Every day, I have to see them. Okay. Now, that's my personal preference. That's not my employment, that's not the requirements of my employer. The requirements of my employer is like I need to see them once a week. But I want to see my 23 people every day. I want to see them every day. I have to lay eyes on them. Okay. I want them to lay eyes on me so that they know somebody cares about what I'm here, and somebody cares about my mental well-being and wants to help me and wants me to move forward and wants me to be okay. You know what I'm saying? Because there are things that's going to take time. And I have to put the work in with them. I have to put the work in with them. Like a lot of my individuals, they don't have income. They have no income. So I have to work with them on getting them income, whether it's Social Security disability or whether it's finding them a job. And I will do it, you know. Some of them, they don't have food. So I'll work with them to get their SNAP benefits, food stamp benefits. I will work with them to get that done. I will work with them to get a cell phone because they have to have a cell phone.
Yeah.
Now, whether it's paid or the free government phone, I'm working toward the free government phone because they qualify. They'll qualify for it in the long run. But there are things that I have to do to make sure that they are taken care of rightfully and make sure I do my job. And if that means that I go a step above and beyond, then that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go that step above and beyond to a point, to a point, to a point. Because what can take place is I want to help them and not have them become dependent on me or codependent on me. The goal is to get them to be stable and to become dependable on themselves. Just like they had that same dependability and resilience on the street, now that they have a home, it's the same concept, similar concept, right? So while these are meant to support stability, they can create, right, fear of doing something wrong because a lot of them think, oh, I don't know, like they have rules and they don't want to break the rules. There's anxiety behind being monitored, right? And then there's that hypervigilance person, right? So for someone who's lived without walls, suddenly being accountable for leasing terms, inspections, property, landlord expectations, it can feel overwhelming. Just imagine how you felt when you had your first place.
Yeah.
Think about it. When you got your very first, everybody think about that. When you got your very first apartment. So many people like freedom. They was like, yeah, I'm away from my parents. Or even when you first went away to college and you was living in the dorm for the first time. Think about that. Think about how you felt. It was scary because you went from one environment to a whole new environment. Yes, you experienced some grief. You experienced some anxiety. You experienced some fear. And it's not that they don't want the housing, because some of them want it. They want to be off the streets. But because housing comes with the new performance standard, it's scary to them. It really is. Because believe me, I I turn into not necessarily mama, you know what I'm saying? I'm like more like auntie, I would say. And when I knock on that door and they open their apartment door and I could see it's not clean, I'm like, clean up your area. And I have to remind them, you're not in a place or live in a place where cleanliness or being the lack of cleanliness is acceptable. You have a shower. Take a shower. If you need soap, if you need personal hygiene items, I have those for you. Ask for them. Or I'll just give it to them. Here's a hygiene packet. Take a shower. You have the opportunity to shower and you can stand there and now hot water as long as you want to. Nobody is going to tell you to get out. Nobody. They're not going to force you out. Nobody's going to tell you to get out.
So is it the fear of now you're doing this and they don't know how long it's going to last. So they're like, I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't want to get used to this. So I'm just not going to do anything to try to do what's good for me because of that reason that I don't know how long it's going to last. Now I got to revert back to the streets where I can't take a shower every day, brush my teeth, drink water from a clean faucet, use actual, it's like, I think about that sometimes. It's just like to go back and forth between the two and try to sustain that because this is what you want, but then have to deal with the other.
Right. Yeah.
Not knowing if it's going to be a long lasting accomplishment. That's got to be a mental struggle.
It is. It's fear. It is a mental struggle because they don't know. And they know what they do know is, yes, can they get evicted? Yes, they can. Have individuals become evicted? Yes, they have, because they failed to follow the rules of living in an apartment, or they didn't pay their rent. And when I tell you their rent is not it's not expensive. It's 30% of their income if they have an income. So if you have no income, guess what?
0 0.
There you go. You're
30%
living
zero.
in a place for free. So, right. But again, they can still become evicted. They still can become evicted. So as we wrap up today, whoo, that's a fast hour. Oh my gosh. Uh, key concepts when it comes to, when it comes to housing the homeless, right? Housing is a structural solution. Home is an emotional experience, just like when we get our homes and when we move. Housing provides four walls, a lease, utilities, and an address, right? A home, and there's a difference between a house and a home. A home provides belonging, safety in the nervous system, identity, memory making, and emotional anchoring, right? And you can place someone in housing, but you cannot force them to feel at home. And a home, or that feeling of home, right? It develops through connection, personalization, time, and emotional safety. Again, home, home. That feeling of home is developed through connection, personalization, time, and emotional safety. So, guess what? There's going to be a part three to this, because we haven't even touched on like the emotional
No.
reality of transitioning from the streets to the home. We haven't even touched on trauma informed care principles, or like, um yeah, we haven't even touched on any of that. Like, grief of environment. Yeah, it's a lot. This is a huge, huge, huge topic. So I don't know. We may do part three next Sunday, or we may like table it and come back to it. But yeah, we may go ahead and do it next Sunday. So, but
That works.
cousin Kareem, any comments, any additional thoughts on this topic of the homeless and being housed, and how housing can feel unstable to someone?
For those family members who have a connection with these people,
Mm-hmm.
I would say just look for the services out there for them. If they're not willing to take your help, if they don't want to live off of you or whatever like that, they need somebody there to be their advocate. They need somebody there to make sure that they're in the system, in their area where they have family members. Because you might say, you know what, they're good. 2 months later, you look up and they're not even in your state
Mm-hmm.
anymore. And then now it becomes even more 100% more difficult to try to find where your family member was sent to.
Mm-hmm.
So if you care about this family member, if you have any compassion, any content in yourself to want to have compassion, keep track of your people.
Mm-hmm.
Keep
Yeah.
track of your people. That's
Well,
just all I have to say.
right. And I always say, be kind to one another. Treat people how you want to be treated. I cannot say that enough. Treat people how you want to be treated. And if more people can just get that concept through their head, maybe there wouldn't be so much strife in this world today. Yes, I said it. I did say it. I did. So, with that, before we end today, I want to speak directly to the person like sitting in an apartment that still doesn't feel like it's theirs, to the person who thought the key would fix everything, to the person who feels guilty for missing the streets, to the person who feels alone in a space they prayed for. I want you to hear this clearly. Nothing is wrong with you. And I'll say that again. Nothing is wrong with you. You are not ungrateful. You are not broken. You are transitioning. And transition always carries grief. You can be thankful for housing and still grieve what you left behind. You can appreciate the stability and still feel lonely in the silence. You can be indoors and still feel like you're displaced. Housing is a structural solution. Home is an emotional experience, and emotional experiences take time. If you miss your street family, that doesn't mean you want homelessness back. It means you value the connection. If silence feels loud, it doesn't mean you're unstable. It means your nervous system is adjusting.
Mm,
If
that's good.
you know what I'm saying? If you feel pressure to succeed, to prove you deserve housing, to never struggle again, take a breath. Just breathe. You have a support system because you don't have to perform stability. You are allowed to adjust slowly. You are allowed to feel unfamiliar inside your own walls. And you're allowed to grieve the version of you that survived outside on those streets. The version of you was strong, alert, protective, and resourceful. That version of you kept you alive. But now you are learning how to live. And that requires a different kind of strength. To the case managers, to the therapists, to the outreach workers, to the landlords, property managers trying to understand. When someone struggles after getting housed, pause before calling it resistance.
Mm,
Ask the question, what might they be grieving? Because sometimes it's not about non compliance, it's loss. Sometimes it's not failure, it's adjustment. Sometimes it's not ingratitude, it's loneliness. And when we respond with compassion instead of punishment, housing has a chance to become home. If you're newly housed and listening, start small. Put one thing on the wall, cook one meal, name your space, play music, open the windows, claim it, make it yours. Home is not built in a day. It's layered, it's practiced, it's inhabited, and most importantly, it's felt. You survive the streets, you can survive stillness. And one day, that silence that feels so loud right now will begin to feel like peace. And believe me, you're going to enjoy that.
mm.
You're not alone in this transition. Your grief is valid. Your adjustment is human, and your stability is still forming. And we will keep having these conversations until housing is not just placement, but belonging. So, until next time, be gentle with yourself. Stability is a journey, and you are still becoming. Okay. So, I want to dedicate this episode, this conversation, to the people whose names will never appear in housing reports, but whose stories matter. And to the men and the women who survived under bridges and tents, shelters, and in cars, to the ones who finally received keys but still sit on the edge of their bed at night wondering why they don't feel settled in, to the ones who miss their street family and feel ashamed to admit it, to the ones trying so hard not to mess this up, because grief taught me something powerful. It taught me that love doesn't disappear just because the environment changes. And stability doesn't mean the ache is gone. Grief is proof that something mattered, someone mattered. And whether you're a grieving person or grieving a place or grieving a version of yourself, it all deserves space. So if today's episode resonated with you, we would love to hear from you. And you can reach us on Instagram at Queen of Life Empowerment or SBSH Grief Podcast. On Facebook at Sometimes We Bougie, Sometimes We Hood. On TikTok at Sometimes Bougie, Sometimes Hood. And on YouTube with Sometimes We're Bougie, Sometimes We're Hood. Be sure to like, follow, share, and subscribe. And of course, if you ever want to be a guest on the show, email us at Sometimes We're Bougie. And that's B-O-U-J-E. Okay, bougie, B-O-U-J-E-E.
Yeah, that's good.
Right. And as Cousin Kareem said, sometimes we what?
Bougie. Sometimes we hood.
That's right. At gmail.com. And, you know, your story matters here. So, and you don't have to walk this road in silence. So everybody take good, gentle care of yourself. And as always, you are carrying the most beautiful love there is. And even in transition, your love and your light still matters. Until next time, join us next Sunday, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard. Have a good one. Enjoy your week.
Enjoy. Take care.
It's a podcast dedicated to exploring the complex emotions of loss, the road to healing, and the strength found in remembering.